Recreational cannabis isn't legal in Canada yet. That hasn't stopped people from spending big bucks on pot, though. Statistics Canada estimates money spent on pot has gone up by an average of 6% a year since 1961. Almost 5 million Canadians bought cannabis just last year. They spent on average about $1,200 each for a total of nearly $6 billion. 90% of that was for non-medicinal, aka currently illegal, purposes. For the sake of comparison, Canadians spent $22 billion on alcohol and $16 billion on tobacco products. But in terms of production, cannabis is now bigger than both of those, mostly because those other industries are more dependent on imports. We import pot too, though. About $300 million worth entered the country illegally last year. We exported $1.2 billion worth. Now, how is all this expected to change once pot becomes legal this summer? Let's bring in Max Montrose. He's founder at the Trichome Institute in Colorado. So now, Max, pot became legal for recreational purposes, I guess, almost 4 years ago in Colorado. Is that right?
That is right. And, Denver actually legalized adult use in 2005, but it's actually the for-sale system that was legalized around 4 years ago. Okay.
And what was the first thing you noted? I mean, did consumption go way up? What did you see?
What happened was exactly what a lot of people like me hoped would happen, which is nothing really shocking happened. Our community took to it. We don't have more car accidents. We don't have a crazy increased amount of hospitalizations. We have some statistics that show that teen usage has actually gone down since legalization. And so the thing that's gone up is housing, jobs. Our city has absolutely exploded.
How is that related to marijuana?
I think it's related to cannabis in the way that we have so much more tax revenue and job opportunities for people. It's not just selling weed in a dispensary. If you're an accountant, you can join the cannabis industry because all the dispensaries need accountants. Same thing with electrical, plumbing, every layer of government, medicine, packaging, sales. This is an industry that's impacting every layer and level of society in terms of growth and job opportunity.
Wow. So now you heard that introduction. We were talking about these new numbers we've got from Statistics Canada. I mean, it's pretty hard to figure out, what's black market, what's legal, what isn't. So it's hard to really get at what's happening here. But they're saying 10%, just 10%, was for medicinal use. Does that sound about right to you?
It's hard for me to comment on because I am more familiar with the U.S. and the Colorado market, but I also wouldn't be surprised by those numbers. Yeah.
So in your situation there, you are seeing the minority is for medicinal, and the vast majority of people are using marijuana for recreational purposes.
Yes, absolutely. People definitely move to Colorado because they're cannabis users and they just want to live in a state where it's okay. And you can go to a local store and have a variety of different options that you can see are pesticide free or know the THC percentages.
So what did you see in terms of people's attitudes towards smoking marijuana or taking it in any form, really? Like, I'm just curious about this shift from it being a criminal activity to being okay and even sponsored by the government in some forms, in the sense that they're going to be the retailer.
Sure. So I think one thing that's important to note is all of the people who smoke cannabis are just continuing to smoke cannabis, and they're excited to do it in newer and freer ways. The amount of people who haven't smoked cannabis before, but who are now getting into it now because it's legal, it's a slow progression. It's a brand new thing. It takes a lot of education and understanding to know what will happen to you when you consume these products, especially because the products work so differently from each other. The difference between edibles, smoked flower, and concentrates is very different. But it is slowly increasing because people are realizing it is okay. It's not as harmful as alcohol. You don't have a hangover in the morning. No one's ever overdosed from cannabis because it's not possible. And it's definitely becoming more normalized.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Max Montrose is the founder at the Trichome Institute in Colorado. Our next guest has been described as Canada's leading marijuana connoisseur, even though he doesn't have a formal degree as a weed sommelier. He works at Canopy Grows, Canada's biggest cannabis company. Radhika is Senior Vice President and Managing Director there. So now, Radhe, you're standing in front of the vault, I'm told. Looks like you've got a whole bunch of bags of different sorts of weed there. Tell us about that.
So we're inside the vault right now. Coincidental timing. One of the things we do with our product is look at the quality of every batch. So for us, quality assurance, making sure our patients get access to high quality products is really important. So we have a whole bunch of sort of scientific processes. We have an in-house lab to sort of check for microbiological or any contaminants and make sure the product's safe for our customers.
Okay.
But in addition to that, we do a qualitative assessment, and that's what we're in the middle of just before this interview. And so on that end, what we do is we get our post-harvest team, so our trim team, we get our production manager and some of our growers, and myself, and every batch that comes out of this building, we review together. We rate the product, we talk about the coloration, we talk about the terpene profile, and things of that nature. So I think if you compare it to wine, it's sort of looking at the different olfactory aspects, and making sure that the product sort of meets the standards that our customers are used to.
Right. So now sommelier, though, as you say, it's normally used with wine. You don't have to do that sort of a service and tasting and so forth for medicinal products, or do you?
So we do to some extent. So I think it's more on the whole flower side. So we wouldn't need to for our soft gel capsules or our cannabis oils. But there's a view by many patients that the entourage effect, which is the view that beyond THC and CBD, the various terpenes and other cannabinoids in the product work synergistically to create the medical effect that allows one patient to find one strain works better for them than another. And so to that end, we want to make sure that the terpene profiles come out properly. And so when we're drying the product, we have to make sure there isn't too much evaporating of the terpenes so that we end up with the smells and tastes that patients have come to expect. So from that perspective, we have been doing under the medical system. I think there's a different angle to it in the recreational system where the cosmetics of the product will matter a lot more to patients and to customers on the recreational side. But I think it's an important part of the process. We sort of can compare it to a chef at the pass, if you would. So it's important that our team sees what they're producing and that they understand everyone from the first propagation of the cuttings all the way to a trim team, what each thing they did along the process resulted in, as well as have third parties like myself that aren't part of the actual production of the product being able to assess it and make sure we're meeting our quality standards.
Yeah, I'm curious about this whole sommelier title that you have, and I'm wondering if these different flavors and so forth are really only noticeable to people who are regular cannabis users. You know, like I'm saying, I don't drink a lot of white wine myself, so I couldn't taste white wine and know, well, is this a Sauvignon Blanc or is this a Chardonnay or whatever? And I'm just wondering if it's only really the connoisseurs who can spot these differences that you're talking about.
It definitely is. I think a connoisseur would be able to pick up the faint hue. So if you think of a red wine, would be able to pick up the notes of oak or cherry within it. But I think anyone can see that a red wine looks different than a white wine. So the same in cannabis. We have a product called Baker Street, and anyone can pick up that has this sort of musty overtone to it and identify that. But then if they tried our DNA genetics lemon skunk, they would be able to easily see that smells like lemons. And so I think whether or not you know much about cannabis, you would notice that smells like lemons. And I think particularly to people that are newer to cannabis, and we'll see this as recreational comes online, people are amazed to find out that marijuana can smell like lemons because the association with a skunk or musty smell.
As it comes online, I mean, how ready do you think Canada's cannabis industry is ready for this big change that's coming in the summer?
I think we're ready. I think we've done a really good job. I know at Canopy, we're in full expansion mode. We just finished building out 3 million square feet of greenhouses. We're working on expanding to a number of provinces across the country. And I know all the provinces have been working really hard. I think it's a lot of work. There's much still to be done in the coming, 5-6 months. But I think everyone, be it provincial liquor boards, private retailers in sub-provinces or production companies like ourselves are gearing up for it, excited at it. And I think it's one of the things that interests people about working in the space. It's working at a massive startup company.
Thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us.
Radhika is Senior Vice President and Managing Director for Canopy Growth.